So Glaut has launched this research program to test and validate AI moderated interviews. And we do this together with our partners, which have the possibility to use our platform for free to run projects and test the AIMIs, AI moderated interviews, from different angles. So before we jump into Charlotte's presentation, that she will speak for herself, the program is composed of 4 main pillars. We are very interested in understanding how AI moderated interviews compare to traditional methodologies, which are namely surveys and human moderation. But also we want to understand better what happens within AIMIs, so across different use cases, topics, and respondent types. We had 3 meetings already. The first one, we discussed results about static surveys compared to AIMIs. And then we had a guest from Curtin University presenting results of a comparison between AIMI and human moderation. And then we had, the last time we had responsive research presenting other findings on AIMI comparing panelists to qualitative researchers. Today, Charlotte will explain you how they run a comparison within AIMI, comparing basically the responses to the static survey, to the static first question, with the deep dives, and in particular, within a very sensitive topic. So the use case is about sensitive and potentially very unfamiliar topics. So without me taking too much stage, I would like to introduce you Charlotte Doidge. She's assistant professor in livestock social epidemiology at the University of Nottingham, in particular at the School of Veterinary Medicine and Science. She's specialized in understanding issues that are very often sensitive, at least to me, the topic of interest here is very sensitive, in agricultural and veterinary contexts. For instance, the use of antibiotics, the emergence of new diseases, potentially, and also contested animal welfare practices, which is one of the topics of her study. This project was done by Charlotte together with her doctoral student, Abbie. She's not here today, but she contributed quite a lot to the research. And I would really like to leave the mic to you, Charlotte, and thank you very much again for being with us today.
Thank you. I'll just start presenting my screen. Okay, so thank you for the introduction, Veronica. Today I'm going to talk about, do AI-generated follow-up questions elicit more informative responses than static questions alone? However, as just discussed, I'm based in the vet school, and the topic of the survey is very veterinary related, so I thought I should give a bit of context about the study topic before we go into the question in more detail. So this work comes from a wider PhD project looking at stakeholder decision-making in relation to calf welfare. So this picture is of Abbie-Louise Smith. She's the PhD student who has done a lot of work on this study and the project overall. The broader aim is to understand how different groups, so people like farmers, vets, and the public, conceptualize animal welfare and make decisions about it. So although the case study here is around calf welfare, the methodological question I'm focusing on today is much broader and applies to survey-based research.
Sorry, Charlotte, I don't want to interrupt you, but I think we are not seeing the PowerPoint correctly.
Oh, okay.
Can you try resharing it? Because we don't see the full screen, but we see the structure.
Do you see my, oh, okay. Do you see the notes? Yeah. Is that better?
Correct, perfect. Thanks.
Okay. So this is Okay, so let me just start that part again. Although the case study here is on calf welfare, the methodological question I'm focusing on today is much broader and applies to survey-based research more generally. So in the dairy industry, calf welfare is a particularly complex and contested issue. Calves can be thought of as marginalised on farms because of their low economic value compared to the adult dairy cows. And this is because the adult dairy cows can provide immediate income through their milk production for farmers, but obviously the calves can't do this. So this means that the management practices the calves are exposed to can be quite variable and sometimes not the best. There are multiple stakeholders involved, such as the dairy farmers, the vets, and the wider industry. And the different groups might prioritise different aspects of the calf's welfare. At the same time, these issues are increasingly visible to the public, which can create this reputational and sustainability pressures for the industry. Also, members of the public are often unaware of practices to manage calves. For example, cow-calf separation, when the calf is separated from the adult cow at a very early age, or disbudding, which is when they use hot irons to prevent the growth of the horn. But when the public find out about these practices, they often reject them, and this can be quite emotive or highly emotive. So understanding how people think about these issues and how they express these views is very important for our dairy industry. So one way of collecting data on people's opinions of complex and contested issues is via qualitative surveys. So these are basically just surveys where the main type of question is the open-ended questions. These are becoming increasingly common as a way of collecting data, especially from the academic research perspective. And this is because they are flexible. They can reach a wide range of participants, including these more harder to reach or time-poor participants, such as farmers or vets. And they're particularly useful for sensitive or complex topics. And this is because they can provide people with the sense of it being more anonymous. However, one of the key limitations is that responses can sometimes be quite thin or superficial. For example, in one of our more recently published studies that utilise these qualitative survey method to understand vet perceptions of data and technologies on farms, we sometimes got quite thin responses, such as the one on the screen. So most beef units have virtually no data. And here I would really like to probe this respondent further to understand more. But unlike interviews, we don't have that opportunity to probe or ask follow-up questions in real time. So the challenge here is, how do we get more depth from this type of data collection? So this is where the AI-generated follow-up questions come in. So in this study, we tested a survey approach using the Glaut platform, where each participant was first asked a standard researcher-designed question, which in this we've called a static question. Then, based on their response, the AI system generates a follow-up question in real time. So here, the idea is that this simulates to some extent the probing you might get in an interview, while still keeping the scalability and the methodological benefits of a survey, such as that flexibility and that feeling of being anonymous. So in terms of the study design, we recruited a representative sample of 296 members of the UK public. So these were representative in terms of gender, age, and the region where they were living. The topic of the survey was perceptions of dairy calf welfare, and in particular, what is a good life for a dairy calf? And in this, each participant answered 6 open-ended questions. And for each question, they first provided a response to the static question and then received 1 AI-generated follow-up question after that. So this just provides an example of one of the interactions for one of the questions. In this case, the static question was, what do you think a good life for a dairy calf looks like? And then the respondent provides an answer. And then based on that answer, there is an AI-generated follow-up question, which then the respondent answers that as well. To evaluate whether the AI follow-ups added value, we looked at three main things. The first one was verbosity, and that's basically just how much people wrote, so what was the word count. The second is lexical diversity, which tells us how varied their language was and whether they were introducing new ideas when they were talking. And third is called keenness analysis, and this looked at whether new topics were expressed more frequently in the AI follow-up responses compared to the static responses. So I think the keenness analysis is maybe a newer concept, so I just wanted to go in a bit more detail of what that was. What we wanted to do here was identify words that were disproportionately frequent in the responses to the AI-generated follow-up questions compared to the static questions. So this analysis directly compares the two corpora, the responses to the original static question and the responses following the AI-generated follow-up. Using keenness analysis, we can pinpoint exactly which words are overrepresented in the AI condition. We then took the words with the highest keenness values and grouped them into these semantically coherent clusters, which allowed us to identify candidate topics emerging from the AI responses. And we then calculate the proportion of respondents mentioning each topic in both conditions. So this lets us distinguish between the responses that are simply more verbose, so more words, and those that actually reflect broader or newly emerging topics in the AI-generated condition. So at a higher level, what we found was that in this study in particular, the AI follow-up questions led to longer and more diverse responses. So both the quantity and the richness of the data increased. So I'm now going to walk through what we did and what our results were in more detail, starting with the response length. So on average, the responses increased from around 41 words for the static question to 71 words when the AI follow-up was included. That's about a 75% increase in the response length. So it's quite a substantial increase in the amount of information that the participants were providing. So then when we look at the lexical diversity, we also see a significant increase of around 9%. This suggests that participants weren't just repeating themselves, and instead they were introducing new vocabulary and elaborating on their initial responses. So the additional length reflects richer data, not just repetition for this. We can then look at the responses in more detail through this keenness analysis. And here we can see examples of where these new topics are expressed. For example, in one question about what constitutes a good life for a dairy calf, only 10 respondents mentioned well-being related concepts in their initial responses. After the AI follow-up, that increased to 110 responses. So in this case, the AI follow-up did actually appear to surface a topic that many participants hadn't initially expressed. And maybe if we only had that static question, this topic about well-being would not have been revealed to us. Then in another question about who should be responsible for providing calves a good life, only 6 respondents mentioned environment-related concepts in their initial responses. Then after the AI follow-up, that increased to 81 respondents. Our prompt for the AI for this one was to explore the underlying reasons and motivations behind the respondents' answers. So we believe here that the AI follow-up sought different types of information compared to the initial static question, and that's where it brought really real value for us here. But I also just wanted to mention that sometimes this wasn't consistent across all the questions. So in some cases, the AI follow-up didn't introduce new topics, but instead just reinforced what the participants had already said. A good example is this question here, which is about cow-calf separation and whether it has a positive or negative impact on the calf's quality of life. So for this question, the AI follow-up tended to repeat or strengthen the same topics rather than bringing out these new ideas that we wanted. But we think this happened because in the original question that you can see here, we'd already asked respondents to explain reasoning at the end of the question. And then in the AI prompt, we also asked for the reasons again. So in some cases, the follow-up questions ended up being a bit repetitive. And this may have been especially likely for this question because it focused on a very specific topic, a particular management practice, which is cow-calf separation, rather than a broader issue. So compare that to the first question that I talked about around what is a good life look like for a dairy calf. That tended to be much of a broader question than this one. So overall, what this suggests is that how effective the AI follow-up is depends quite a lot on how the original question is written and then how the follow-up prompt is designed to go with this. So I think the important takeaway from this is that the AI does not automatically improve the responses, but the design of the question and the way that the AI is instructed is really important here. So that means that AI supports the process, but it doesn't just replace the need for that careful research design. So the role of the researcher is very important in this. So from the findings, and you can see more of these findings in the white paper that should hopefully be published soon after this, we can identify some situations where AI follow-up questions seem to be most effective. So they work particularly well when the initial question is broad or open-ended, when the topic is unfamiliar to the respondents, and when people haven't already been asked to explain their reasoning. They also depend on the AI being prompted to explore new areas rather than simply repeating the same kind of question. On the other hand, AI follow-ups tend to be less useful when the initial question is already very specific or already asks respondents to explain their reasoning in detail. They can also be less effective if the follow-up prompts are too similar to the original question, because in them cases, you tend to get repetition rather than having that new information. So to summarize, AI-generated follow-up questions can increase both the depth and the diversity of your qualitative survey responses. However, that benefit isn't just automatic, and that value comes from how the questions are designed and how you use the AI rather than simply using the AI itself. So thank you for listening to that short presentation. And I just need to acknowledge that Abbie's PhD was funded by the EU as well.
Thank you, Charlotte. It was a brilliant presentation, and I find these results very interesting myself. First of all, it's not only proof of how AI can increase depth, but also it's providing some boundary conditions. And this is something we are always encouraging to do to our partners, to stress test the methodologies and find, boundaries. So it really seems from your results that there are better ways, there are good ways and not so good ways to structure questions in order to get deeper probes.
Yeah.
So I would like to ask now if there's anyone attending that have potentially questions for Charlotte, any feedback, any curiosity. I think this is the first time we tackle this sort of topic that's quite new to our program. And that's also why I find it so interesting, to be honest. Is anybody in the audience looking for some material?
Hi, Charlotte. Matt here. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Glaut. First of all, thank you for your work and for this super interesting presentation. I have a question, a simple but maybe, counterintuitive one. What is something that was surprising for you? What's the thing that somehow surprised you the most, either positively or negatively, something you were not expected at the beginning of the project?
I think what was surprising to me is actually how the respondents interacted with the AI and how conversational they made their responses compared to like the standard static survey. I think I did also get a few comments back from respondents saying how it was very interesting compared to the usual surveys they do because of that interactivity. I think it really actually helped us to get more in-depth data.
Very interesting. For us, it's generally quite hard to prove the quality of the interactions because in many sample providers, you do have respondents that aim to get to the end as quickly as possible, and therefore a probing mechanism can actually be resulting into more time being spent with the same survey. So yeah, we're still working in finding the right mechanism and the right KPI to measure in terms of engagement. Thank you.
I also have a couple of questions, Charlotte. So in your field, I mean, considering the way you're used to collect data, either qualitative surveys, but also I guess you do a lot of human moderation and human data collection, right? I can imagine moderators visiting farmers on field and interviewing them like this. So how do you see this new methodology entering your field? Potentially, was this your first effort, first of all? Was this your first trial, or have you tried AI moderation before? And how is this methodology potentially changing your field in the next years?
I think, yeah, this is my first try at doing this specific method. And for me, how I was viewing it was, rather than a replacement for the interview, it's more of an advancement on the qualitative survey. So this is why the way that this was presented was the limitations of the qualitative survey. So when I've previously done a qualitative survey, I had them quite thin responses, and that was with vets who maybe might be happy to write more than compared to a farmer, who is what I often do a lot of research with. So I was trying to find a kind of survey method where we have them more open responses that might work with these people who are time poor or who don't want to write. So I think, especially because your Glaut software has that ability to respond via your voice as well as by text, I think that's been very useful as well, because we're going to use the software again for a different study with farmers, and actually the feedback we've had from the farmers has been very good compared to like a standard survey because of that voice. Yeah.
And so do you see colleagues trying this methodology as well in similar topics and fields?
Oh, yes, I think it will take off, because I think compared to the interview, it provides that flexibility. So, well, I'm just thinking about the farmers and the vets again. They don't have much time to give maybe an hour all the time. So having this ability to collect qualitative data so flexibly, I think would be quite useful for our fields and the kind of participants that we're interested in agriculture and veterinary.
But do you have a particular view on the role of the topic itself? Because there are a little bit of a disagreement on whether particularly sensitive topics, hard to speak topics, should be devolved to humans, which are more able to develop emotions and rapport to respondents. But on the other side, they can form a sort of barrier, so people may not be that willing to share their true, honest opinion with people when it comes to particularly sensitive topics. In this case, it was about a sensitive topic, but potentially also a not very known topic from the general public. So what's your view on this, on the fact that particularly sensitive topics could be, more adapt to AI moderation or to human moderation? What do you think about this?
I think it probably depends a lot on what your sensitive topic is, because although the calf welfare is a sensitive topic, it's an emotive topic, it isn't something that really directly affected the respondents compared to a disease that they have personally or something that is their lived experience. So there's a slight difference there. So I think when you use the AI, from my experience trying to put the probes in and things like that for this study and then another study as well, I think you have to do a really careful design and put safeguards in place. So it's not just about what you're asking the AI to probe, but kind of how that AI is probing as well, such as tone, because sometimes it can give quite a positive tone, but that's not necessarily what you want when you're discussing something very serious. You need to make sure it is neutral and non-judgmental and isn't leading. So you need to make sure you add all of that into your prompt as well. Maybe limiting the number of prompts, because you don't want to keep trying to get information out of someone if they really don't want to give that sensitive information. So allowing that space for the participant to not answer that question, I think, is quite important for that as well. Also, just having that human oversight, monitoring the responses and reviewing the follow-up questions that are given. But I think what's really important as well is do so much pre-testing, I guess, because no survey is going to have exactly the same response. You need to figure out what are the potential AI generated questions that could come out of it. So I would recommend a lot of piloting if you're doing something very sensitive.
That's true. I totally agree. And yeah, absolutely. So Charlotte, I would really like to thank you for your time today. It was lovely to have you with us. One last chance to ask Charlotte any question from the audience. If no one raises their hand, you will find the results of the white paper published right away on our website. I actually share the page with you here, so that anyways, I don't find the chat anymore. Sorry, here. This is the web page where we will share the white paper right away. And if you have missed the session, it's been recorded. We will share it very soon as well. Thank you very much, Charlotte. Say thank you to Abbie as well for all her valuable work. And we hope to see you soon in person eventually.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone. See you next time.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.